In another world, there stood a colossal arena where brutal battles raged every single day. For many of the world's inhabitants, this arena had become a way to make a fortune through constant betting. One day, among the warriors forced into that brutal stage, there was a man who found himself fighting against an entire army of enemies, alone. He hadn't chosen to be there. One moment, he was living his life, and the next, he was thrown into this chaos with only one option left: to fight or die. Time after time, situations unfolded where it seemed impossible for him to walk away alive. And yet, no matter the odds, this man always slaughtered his enemies and emerged the victor. He never showed mercy. Every opponent was dispatched with cold cruelty, each death more vicious than the last. Despite the breathtaking spectacle of his victories, most spectators grew to hate him. Their anger wasn't because of his brutality but because their wagers constantly failed. Again and again, they had bet on the beasts of the arena to finally tear him apart, only to lose everything. Because of this, the crowd's collective wish was for someone, anyone, powerful enough to defeat this lone warrior to appear in the arena. One day, that wish seemed granted. The presenter announced with triumphant excitement that finally, a true opponent was coming. One who could put an end to the man's reign of blood. Moments later, a giant, towering, armored, unstoppable. No one had ever defeated this monstrous lizard before. Yet, unlike the crowd, the man felt no fear. Instead, he welcomed the chance for a worthy fight, believing at last he would be tested. The man calmly placed his helmet on his head, picked up the nearest weapon he could find, and prepared to face the towering beast. His mind drifted briefly to the life he once knew, in another world, alongside his partner, a life stolen from him in an instant. Now, survival in this violent realm meant endless combat against waves of enemies. Here, destinies were tangled, with strangers turning into trusted allies or bitter enemies with a single twist of fate. No matter the obstacles, the man had made a promise to himself: he would survive, and one day he would return home. Far from the arena, two royal knights were on an urgent mission to eliminate a dangerous group of war orcs. Their task, however, went horribly wrong. What was supposed to be a swift execution turned into a desperate retreat, pursued by a massive horde of furious orcs. One orc closed in on them, weapon raised. Aspen, one of the knights, prepared to counterattack, but she suddenly realized she wouldn't have the speed to strike first. In that critical second, Nathan, the second knight, acted before her, cutting down the orc and saving her life. As the creature's corpse hit the ground, Nathan asked her if she was unharmed and how far they were from the fortress walls. Aspen replied quickly that she was fine and that the fortress was close, very close. Nathan, thinking quickly, decided that unless they thinned the orcs' numbers right now, they wouldn't make it. Planting his feet, he faced the charging horde while Aspen sprinted ahead toward the fortress gates. The orcs came at Nathan like a wave, but his blade moved faster. Limbs and torsos fell apart as he carved a path through their flesh with ruthless precision. Meanwhile, Aspen threw herself at the ancient gate's mechanisms, fighting to open it before the orcs overwhelmed Nathan. Minutes later, the fortress creaked open. Aspen shouted that Nathan had to run for it. Without hesitation, Nathan sprinted for the opening, leaving behind a mountain of butchered bodies. But then the danger escalated. A giant log flew through the air, aimed straight at Nathan. He pushed himself harder, running faster toward the safety of the fortress. He risked a glance over his shoulder to see how close the orcs were, and that's when he saw it. The flying log smashed directly into Aspen. She had stepped into its path, sacrificing herself to shield him from certain death. Despite the brutal impact, despite blood running down her face and limbs barely holding together, Aspen didn't fall. She stood defiantly while the enraged orcs closed in on both of them. Nathan, seeing this, grabbed her and told her firmly to hold on, just a little longer. With Aspen in his arms, Nathan tore through the open gate, desperate to reach shelter. Behind him, the orcs were howling, charging, weapons raised. Nathan struggled to close the gate behind them, fighting not just the orcs, but time itself. Above, hidden in the shadows, a group of elves watched the entire spectacle unfold. They whispered among themselves in hushed amazement, one of them saying that they had just found the perfect candidates for a task of their own. Meanwhile, the orcs hammered on the fortress gate, desperate to break through and finish their bloody hunt. Nathan wasn't about to let that happen. He countered their every push with savage, decisive strikes, cutting down any who got too close to Aspen. Soon, Nathan left Aspen's side, searching for something big, something heavy. His hand found a massive object, and with a surge of strength, he lifted it high, preparing to use it as a weapon of last resort. The orcs, realizing what was coming, surged forward in one final, desperate attack. Nathan hurled the object into their midst. It hit with devastating force, obliterating dozens of them in an instant. The ground where it landed was littered with twisted, broken remains. With the orcs stunned by the impact, Nathan used the brief pause to close the gates securely. Aspen could see Nathan's mind working already, thinking of what else he could throw at them. But when she tried to speak, Nathan silenced her sharply, saying that every word she spoke made her wounds worse. But Aspen ignored him. She had an idea, and she was going to share it. Nathan knew exactly what she was going to suggest before she even said it. He told her to stop, not wanting to hear it. But Aspen said firmly that the one who could still move had to leave. Someone had to escape. And she said it with authority, making it clear it was not a suggestion but an order. Nathan refused. Again and again, he said that he wasn't going to leave her behind. But Aspen kept pushing, demanding that Nathan retreat before it was too late. As Nathan struggled to hold the gate against the orcs' assault, one of the creatures managed to smash through with a crude weapon, creating a large gap. Another orc stuck its snarling face through the opening, searching for its prey. Nathan could see it. The enemy was almost inside. At that moment, Nathan stepped away from the battered gate, drawing his sword with deliberate calm. He told Aspen that he had his own plan, a strategy that, if it worked, would turn this battle into legend. His voice carried certainty, as if he had already seen the victory written in the future. But before Nathan could act on his plan, Aspen pointed toward the sky, asking him what that strange object was above them. Turning his head, Nathan saw it too, a massive object, glimmering metallic, unmistakably shaped like a flying saucer. Even the orcs paused, momentarily abandoning their assault on the fortress. Their bloodthirsty roars were replaced by stunned silence as they stared upward. Suspicion spread through them quickly, and whispers among the orcs suggested that Nathan must have summoned this unknown magic to finish them off. Without warning, the saucer unleashed a radiant beam from its underside, a tractor beam that pulled at everything beneath it. First it drew loose stones and weapons, then orcs. Their bodies dragged upward as they thrashed helplessly in the air. The pull only grew stronger. Nathan jammed his sword deep into the ground, using the hilt as an anchor as he reached for Aspen, determined not to lose her too. But his sword, like everything else, began to tremble and loosen under the pull of the beam. Then Aspen's body went limp. Nathan realized with horror that she had lost consciousness. He shouted at her, trying to wake her up, but her body remained lifeless in his grip. Finally, the ground gave way, his sword burst free, and Nathan felt his own body being lifted violently upward. Aspen slipped from his grasp. Nathan lunged for her, fingertips brushing her sleeve, but the tractor beam dragged them apart. The saucer's beam vanished just as suddenly as it had appeared, and the flying object accelerated away, carrying its unwilling captives into the unknown. When Nathan woke, his head was spinning, his limbs weak. He tried to stand, struggling to focus on where he was. Before him stood two elven figures. Girls by their appearance, but with sharp eyes and cruel smiles. Nathan, still dazed, muttered that they looked nothing like the elves he had heard stories about. These elves didn't fit the graceful, noble image told in old tales. One of them stepped forward and planted her boot firmly on his back, shoving him face first into the dirt. She pressed down, pinning him with brutal ease. While he struggled, the second elf revealed a thin, ornate wand that hummed with strange energy. She brought it to Nathan's neck, and with a cruel flick, pain exploded through his body. The agony sent shockwaves up his spine, immobilizing him. As Nathan gritted his teeth against the searing pain, the two elves began discussing among themselves how fortunate they were to have captured such a fine piece of prey. They laughed as if they had just won a game, placing bets on what kind of profit he would bring. Nathan lay in the dirt, furious at the absurdity of the situation. He had survived orcs, an arena of monsters, and yet here he was, pinned down like some wild animal by a pair of mocking elves. The two girls chattered about bets, one of them casually saying that she placed the same wager she always did, confident that this one would pay off big. Suddenly, the ground beneath Nathan shifted. He felt the floor rising beneath him, lifting him upward with mechanical precision. He tried to move, but the pain from the elf's wand had left his limbs trembling. As the platform ascended, light flooded his vision, and then he saw it. A vast arena opened before him, massive stands filled with thousands of cheering spectators. They were all elves. Their emerald eyes gleamed with anticipation, their laughter sharp and hungry. Nathan scanned the crowd, stunned by the sheer scale of the place, by the sea of identical, beautiful, predatory faces watching him like a curiosity on display. As his gaze lowered, Nathan spotted chained figures around him, familiar shapes. The orcs. Several of them, including the ones who had chased him in Aspen, stood near him. Their faces twisted in confusion and rage, demanding explanations in guttural shouts. They wanted to know how they had ended up here, who had brought them to this nightmare. Nathan looked closely at one of the orcs' necks and noticed something strange: brands, symbols seared into their skin. They weren't written in any orcish dialect Nathan recognized. These weren't shackles of metal, they were marks of ownership. From an elevated seat, a figure clad in fine robes stepped forward. The judge. He raised his hand, and with the lazy arrogance of one used to power, he began explaining the rules of this twisted game. The judge announced that there were now 100 beings in the arena, and only 3 of them would be allowed to leave alive. It was not just a battle, it was an execution staged for sport. As soon as the judge finished speaking, the chains binding the orcs clattered to the ground, disintegrating into thin air. The orcs looked to their commander, expecting answers, orders, anything. But the lead orc just smiled darkly and drew his sword. Attention shifted suddenly to another prisoner near the edge of the arena, a terrified man running for the exit, screaming that he wanted no part of this. He wasn't alone. Others clustered near the gates, clearly desperate to flee. For a moment, hope flickered among them. But the elf judge raised his hand lazily, and from it came a torrent of energy, a searing beam that vaporized everything in its path. When the blinding light faded, all that remained was a mound of black ash. The message was clear: no one leaves without fighting. The terrified man dropped to his knees, begging for his life, and began crawling toward Nathan, pleading for help. He said that he just wanted to go home, that he didn't deserve to die here. Nathan looked at the trembling, broken man, then weapon from the ground and drove it through the beggar's chest. Cold, efficient, final. Near the center of the arena, the orc commander barked orders. He told his warriors that survival depended on doing what they knew best, fighting until the very end. The orcs roared in agreement, picking up weapons scattered across the arena floor. They moved as a single unit, ruthless and organized. Nearby, a woman screamed for mercy, her voice cutting through the chaos. She begged the orcs to spare her, promised she was no threat, but the orcs didn't care. One of them ran her through without hesitation. No pity, no pause. Just brutal efficiency. As the massacre escalated, Nathan watched, recognizing that the orcs were transforming, becoming something worse with every second. Their cruelty was growing sharper, their violence more deliberate. Nathan's gaze drifted back to the man. There was a moment of silent understanding before the light faded from the man's eyes. Then the orcs turned toward Nathan. They had seen enough to recognize him as the knight who had been fleeing them alongside a girl. They knew his face now, and they wanted blood. Nathan rose slowly, gripping his weapon tightly. He met their stares with his own burning defiance. He told them that whatever they planned to do to him, whatever torment they had in store, he intended to repay in full, with interest. A small group of orcs broke away from the others, determined to kill Nathan quickly and cleanly before returning to the rest of their slaughter. They moved with brutal intent, hacking down weaker creatures as they made their way toward him. But Nathan was faster. He dodged their clumsy swings, weaving through their attacks with sharp, practiced precision, and he declared that they had made a fatal mistake by thinking they could corner him. Without hesitation, Nathan drove his fist into the chest of the nearest orc with such force that the creature's feet left the ground. The orc flew backward, spinning awkwardly through the air like a broken doll before crashing into the arena floor. Nathan didn't stop. The instant that first orc hit the ground, Nathan reached down, grabbed the nearest discarded blade, and rose into a brutal rhythm of violence. His first swing decapitated an orc cleanly, the head spinning like a grotesque coin toss. One by one, the orcs who had rushed him fell, bodies broken, weapons clattering uselessly. But even as Nathan took down the attackers around him, another orc crept up behind, determined to remove Nathan's helmet for an easier kill. The orc's thick fingers clawed at the helmet's straps, twisting, trying to expose the vulnerable flesh underneath. Nathan, feeling the grip tightening, shifted his weight, seized the orc's wrist, and with a burst of strength, flipped him over his shoulder. The creature hit the ground hard, the impact cracking bones, and Nathan finished him by driving his boot straight down, crushing the orc's skull in a wet burst of gore. More came for him. 2 orcs advanced with snarling grins, confident that together they could finish him off. Nathan didn't hesitate. He snatched a nearby battle axe and buried it in the skull of the first orc before it could lift its weapon. The second wasn't as lucky. Nathan grabbed him by the throat with both hands, lifting the orc off the ground by sheer force, before slamming him down and pounding his face until it was nothing but pulp. Raising the broken, twitching body high, Nathan defiantly displayed the ruined corpse to the roaring crowd. His face was a storm of blood and fury. He raised his middle finger to the stands, declaring that no one in the audience would ever look down on the winged lion knights of the human union, not while he was still breathing. Among the sea of elves in the stands, one observer watched him closely. An elf, pale-haired and sharp-eyed, was momentarily struck not only by Nathan's brutal efficiency but by his sheer defiance, his refusal to bow to their spectacle. Nearby, a girl sat with a man who showed no reaction at all, indifferent to the slaughter below. One of the orcs in the arena was seething with rage, eager to charge Nathan and tear him apart, but the orc commander held him back. The leader said that wasting their numbers in a blind rush was foolish. It would be better, he explained, to watch, to learn, and to strike with precision. Nathan was good, but reckless. Sooner or later, that recklessness would betray him. Meanwhile, Nathan was a storm of violence. When he found another battle axe among the fallen weapons, he hurled it with deadly accuracy. The weapon spun through the air and embedded itself in the skull of another orc, sending the massive body toppling forward like a felled tree. Without pause, Nathan charged toward the fallen orc, wrenching a heavy sword from its slack grip. The sword fit in his hands like it belonged there, and Nathan used it to carve through the surrounding enemies, hacking heads from shoulders with savage precision. 2 more orcs approached, this time armed with long spears, and they moved to surround him. The first orc lunged forward, driving the tip of his spear toward Nathan's chest. With a swift movement, Nathan parried the strike with his sword, deflecting it at just the right angle so the spear plunged through the second orc's stomach. Both creatures froze, one impaled by his ally's weapon, the other horrified at his mistake. Nathan ended both with a single, sweeping blow that severed their heads. Silence spread briefly around him. No orcs left standing, no enemies within striking distance. And then the orc leader stepped forward, flanked by a handful of loyal brutes. Nathan pointed his blade straight at the orc commander and said that his face looked suspiciously familiar. Then he accused the orc of being the one who hurled the massive log at him back during the fortress siege. The orc commander chuckled darkly and said that humans, too, seemed to enjoy the thrill of savage combat. The words were oddly measured, as though some reasoning creature now spoke through the brutal orc form. Nathan wasn't interested in talk. He said that he didn't have time for speeches and demanded the orc face him here and now, blade against blade. The commander only grinned, saying that this was exactly the kind of battle he had been waiting for. Before the duel could start, another orc, standing at the commander's side, seized the opportunity and attacked Nathan unexpectedly. His blow knocked the sword from Nathan's hand, and the orc mocked him, asking where his so-called fighting spirit had gone. In the stands, the crowd murmured, eager to see Nathan fall at last. The pink-haired elf among them pulled out a sleek, tablet-like device, tapping the screen to increase her wager on Nathan's survival. She wasn't betting on him out of sympathy, she just knew a fighter when she saw one. Nathan fought back with everything he had, striking, grappling, clawing for a weapon. But the orc pressed him hard, forcing him to the ground and raising his weapon high for the final blow. The crowd leaned forward, breath held. Just before the orc could bring the killing blow down, Nathan rolled aside. The weapon smashed into the ground, sending dust and splinters flying. On the upper levels of the arena, a blue-haired elf commented to her companion that Nathan's survival was astonishing. She said that humans were usually pathetic in the arena, weak creatures that barely registered in the rankings. But this one was different. Then she addressed her partner, calling him her younger brother, and asked who they should face next in the arena's deadly games. The brother simply shrugged, saying it made no difference to him. Down below, Nathan finally overpowered his opponent, twisting the orc's wrist until the creature screamed in pain. With brutal efficiency, Nathan finished him and cast the lifeless body aside. He stood tall and proclaimed that no matter what the orcs tried, they would never defeat him. The other orcs watched, wide-eyed, stunned by Nathan's resilience and skill. Their bloodlust faltered for a moment. Then the orc leader stepped closer, eyeing Nathan with a new kind of interest. He said that Nathan was far from ordinary, and he admired that. He even offered a proposition: that they join forces, that together they could dominate this blood-soaked arena, rise above the others, and take control of the brutal games played here. His offer sent a ripple of outrage through the stands. The elves hissed and shouted, demanding that the fighting continue. To them, alliances were treachery, and treachery spoiled the entertainment. Nathan gripped his sword tightly, standing tall in the center of the carnage, ready for whatever came next. The orc leader stepped forward, showing Nathan both the ferocity and the cowardice of his kind in the same breath. He said that creatures like them, himself, a ruthless orc chieftain, and Nathan, a brutal human knight, could strike fear into the entire arena if they fought side by side. He spoke with the desperate confidence of someone who knew he couldn't win alone, masking fear with bravado. Nathan, however, wasn't fooled. He found it amusing, ridiculous, even, that this orc, who moments ago had thirsted for his blood, now sought an alliance simply to save his own miserable life. Nathan responded coldly, telling the orc that he didn't care about the audience in the stands, those soulless spectators cheering for death like it was a festival. He explained that he was here for one purpose alone: to find Aspen and get home. That was all. The games, the cheers, the bloodlust, none of it mattered to him. The orc leader's smile faltered. Without another word, the orc leader raised his weapon, and the two clashed. The arena shook with the violence of their battle, the sounds of clashing steel echoing through the stands. But before their fight could reach its peak, the massive gates of the arena began to shift, creaking open with slow, grinding weight. The orcs around them stopped fighting and turned to the gates, drawn by the deep, resonant sound. From the growing shadows beyond the gates, a monstrous form emerged, something none of them recognized. First came claws, massive, serrated. Then the head of a crocodile, its maw lined with teeth as long as daggers. Its body was a grotesque fusion of creatures, like a spider grafted onto a scorpion, legs twitching with unnatural rhythm, a barbed tail coiling behind it. The name echoed through the crowd: Ibuni, the arena's ultimate predator. The battle between Nathan and the orc leader paused. Even the orcs, bloodthirsty and wild, didn't know what to make of the creature. While they hesitated, Ibuni didn't. The monster lunged forward, devouring the nearest orcs in brutal, snapping bites, tearing them apart like toys. Nathan watched as the beasts that had tried to kill him moments ago screamed in terror as they were consumed. With the corpses of the orcs piling up around it, Ibuni shifted its gaze. Now it focused on the only two remaining threats: Nathan and the orc leader. Nathan cursed under his breath, furious at this new twist of fate. Fighting through hordes of orcs was one thing. Surviving against a monster designed for killing was something else entirely. As Nathan's focus shifted toward the advancing monster, one of the orcs saw his chance. Moving quietly, the orc rushed forward and seized Nathan from behind, locking him in place. He shouted to his leader to finish Nathan off now, before the monster reached them. The orc leader didn't hesitate. With a cruel grin, he drove his sword straight through Nathan's body, and with the same stroke, through his own loyal comrade. The orc leader didn't flinch. Killing one of his own meant nothing if it bought him survival. Without a second glance, he turned and fled, leaving Nathan impaled, bleeding, and barely conscious, locked in the dying embrace of the orc who had betrayed him to save himself. Ibuni advanced. Nathan, fading fast, clenched his jaw and thought bitterly about the absurdity of it all. And in that fading moment, he whispered an apology to Aspen. He regretted failing her, regretted that he wouldn't survive to find her and take her home. But then, like a whisper riding on the edge of consciousness, he heard her voice. Aspen. She said that she wished she were anywhere but here, that she wanted to be somewhere safer. From the dust and gore of the arena, another figure appeared, stunning the crowd into silence. A girl stepped forward between Nathan and Ibuni, sword drawn, posture steady. The audience gasped in disbelief. Nathan could barely comprehend it. Aspen stood before him, whole, unbroken, alive. There were no signs of the brutal wounds she had sustained earlier. Somehow, impossibly, she was back. Aspen unsheathed her sword with calm determination and said that it was time for the second wing to take over. As she spoke, Ibuni lunged, attacking with the full weight of its monstrous frame. It seemed impossible that Aspen could survive the assault, but she didn't flinch. Nathan, wounded and helpless, watched with dread as the creature closed in. He shouted that she should run, begged her to escape, to live. But Aspen refused. She acknowledged her doubt, she wasn't sure she could win, but said that if she had even the smallest chance to save him, then she had to take it. She added that if Nathan did survive, he should keep fighting, and, quietly, she said that she didn't want him to forget her if he found his way home. Aspen attacked, but the monster's strength overwhelmed her. Ibuni crashed to the ground with her first assault, stunned but not broken. For a moment, it seemed like Aspen might succeed, but then the creature stirred again, rising on its spiked, spider-like legs. Its wounds, deep, vicious wounds, were already closing. The elves in the stands cheered with renewed excitement. The judges smiled with satisfaction. Ibuni's resilience only made the spectacle better for them. Aspen, meanwhile, could hardly comprehend what she was seeing. How could something that wounded stay standing? Nathan, his vision blurred with pain, reached for the sword still impaling him. Gritting his teeth against the unbearable agony, he gripped the blade and slowly pulled it free. The pain nearly broke him, but he remembered Aspen standing against orcs while near death. If she could endure, so could he. With the blade finally free, Nathan staggered to his feet, swaying but standing. Meanwhile, Ibuni gathered its strength for another attack. The massive creature launched itself at Aspen, claws extended, ready to finish her. Fear gripped Aspen. She froze, unable to act, her mind clouded by the enormity of the threat before her. Nathan shouted to her, told her to move, to fight, to do anything except stand still and wait to die. He reminded her that he couldn't bear to lose her again. His voice broke through the wall of panic, reaching her when nothing else could. Aspen gathered herself, realizing it was too late to flee. She made the choice to fight one more time. As Ibuni lunged, she dodged by inches and unleashed another technique. This strike carried all her fury, all her fear, all her determination. Her sword moved faster, cutting deeper than before, and the blade sank into the monster's hide with devastating force. The second attack hit harder, and this time, Ibuni felt it. The monster reeled backward, wounded worse than before. Nathan, though still barely standing, watched with a surge of hope. The fight wasn't over yet. Ibuni crashed to the ground again, this time with wounds far deeper and more devastating than before. For a fleeting moment, it looked as if Aspen had truly defeated the monster. She turned to Nathan, smiling through exhaustion, ready to boast that bringing down the beast had been easier than expected. But Nathan's expression stopped her. He shouted for her to dodge immediately. It was too late. Even with its mangled body, Ibuni wasn't finished. With a surge of desperate rage, the monster's massive tail whipped through the air like a thunderbolt, slamming into Aspen with brutal force. The impact sent her hurtling across the arena like a broken doll, smashing her into the stone wall with a sickening crack. Dust and debris exploded around her, and she crumpled motionless at the base of the wall. Nathan's fury didn't ignite because of the pain of losing her, but because he saw the truth. This wasn't just a fight. This was a spectacle. The crowd didn't want a victor. They wanted annihilation. They had wanted Ibuni to rise again, to tear apart whatever survivors still crawled in the dirt. Nathan realized that Aspen's blood was on their hands as much as on the monster's claws. The orcs, the elves, the betting, the cheering. It was all just one enormous, cruel game. That was the moment something inside Nathan shattered. His rage didn't burn hot. It burned cold, precise, final. He moved like death incarnate, striking down anything that moved, anyone who even breathed too close to him. He no longer cared who was in his way, orc, elf, or unfortunate soul. His attacks were no longer just for killing, they were for punishment. His fists tore flesh from bone, his blade carved muscle from tendon. Blood splashed the sand in sickening fountains. And then his eyes locked onto the one target he'd wanted more than any other. The leader of the orcs. The coward who betrayed his own kind for a fleeting shot at survival. The orc leader's smug confidence drained in an instant as he saw the madness in Nathan's eyes. He screamed for his warriors to help him, but there was no help coming. Nathan descended on him like a force of nature. Nathan didn't just kill him, he destroyed him. He pounded the orc's skull until nothing remained but shattered fragments and sticky pulp. He beat the body until it was unrecognizable, just a twitching, blood-soaked husk. And when he finally stopped, even the audience, those who had cried for violence moments before, sat stunned, their faces pale, their cheers silenced by horror. But not everyone was horrified. The pink-haired elf smiled, satisfied, already calculating her winnings from the bets she had placed on Nathan. The blue-haired elf and her brother, too, wore faint smirks, entertained not by the blood, but by the unexpected twist Nathan had brought to their deadly entertainment. Before Nathan could lift his blade again, soldiers in polished armor swarmed him. They threw him to the ground, pinning him with practiced precision. As they chained him down, Nathan's only thought was of Aspen, wondering if he could truly keep his promise to remember her, to never let her memory fade no matter what came next. One of the soldiers raised a weapon, an electric prod, and jammed it into Nathan's side. A surge of violent electricity ripped through him, his muscles spasming uncontrollably, and with a final flash of pain, everything went black. When Nathan awoke, he was hanging in chains, deep in one of the elven prisons beneath the arena. The cold of the stone walls was sharp against his bare skin. This was where the elves kept those marked for future battles, or simply those deemed too dangerous to let loose. Soon, footsteps echoed down the corridor. One of the arena's owners, a figure dressed in elegant robes dripping with wealth and power, stepped through the doorway, flanked by armed guards. His eyes burned with frustration as he looked at Nathan's beaten, hanging form. Nathan offered no resistance, no fight, just that same defiant glare. The arena owner hissed with venom that Nathan should be grateful for the water provided. But his patience was gone. He stepped closer, face twisting with disgust, and said that Nathan's actions had ruined everything. Nathan responded without hesitation, saying that none of this was his problem, that the owner's failures were his own doing. The arrogance of Nathan's reply only fed the owner's rage. He grabbed an electric rod from one of the guards and drove it into Nathan's ribs, sending another wave of excruciating pain through his body. The owner shouted that the arena was more than just blood, it was profit, entertainment, an empire of gambling and spectacle. He said that every scream from the dying filled his coffers, that the elves hungered to see monsters tear apart humans and creatures alike. He explained that over time, the arena's rulers had perfected the system: capture weaker races, throw them into the pit, and watch as the wagers rolled in. He admitted that today's show was supposed to be special, not just random slaughter, but a carefully orchestrated event. The inclusion of the orcs was supposed to drive betting to new heights. Orcs were popular. Orcs were strong. They brought spectacle, and spectacle brought wealth. The owner said he had even arranged for the orc warlord Bakuma to enter the fight later, a reveal that would have sent the crowd into a frenzy. The orcs had been the plan for profit. And Nathan had destroyed that plan. The orcs were dead. Ibuni was nearly ruined. The chance to auction surviving orcs into slavery. Lost. The entire day's profit obliterated by one lone human with a sword. The arena master hissed that Nathan must have been sent here on purpose to sabotage his operations, that no mere accident could result in this much damage. Again, he stabbed the electric rod into Nathan, his fury blinding him to reason. Nathan, through gritted teeth, managed to speak. He said he didn't care about profits or plans. He said the arena owner had only himself to blame for dragging him here, that every failure, every death, every lost coin, was a direct result of the greed and cruelty of the elves. His words carried weight, sharpened by fury. The guards who had laughed before now glanced at each other uneasily, afraid of that fierce, unbroken gaze. Nathan's glare cut through them like daggers, making even the arena owner hesitate for the briefest second. Nathan said that he had no intention of fighting for sport, that he didn't volunteer for this sadistic bloodbath, and that the blame for everything happening here lay squarely at the feet of the arena's owner. Suddenly, the owner of the arena, who had been seething with rage only moments before, grew quiet. He muttered to himself that perhaps, in some twisted way, He shared responsibility for what had unfolded. For the first time, a flicker of reflection passed over his expression. After a pause, he spoke in a calm, measured tone, telling Nathan that from this moment forward, Nathan was his property, his personal investment, until every last bit of the debt Nathan owed was repaid. It was a declaration, cold and transactional, as if human lives could be tallied like numbers on a ledger. Nathan's fury ignited again, hotter this time. He was disgusted not just by the claim, but by the arrogance of the man before him. Nathan thought that this so-called master of games didn't even have the intelligence to understand what was happening around him. He told the owner of the arena that he didn't care about him, his debts, or the rigged empire he built on suffering. Nathan said that he would never be a pawn in someone else's scheme for profit, no matter the cost. Calmly, almost mockingly, the owner of the arena offered his condolences for the death of Nathan's partner. He said that it was unfortunate that Aspen hadn't survived the spectacle, that she might have been an entertaining addition to future fights. That one remark struck Nathan deeper than any blade ever could. In an instant, memories flooded him. The last glance he caught of Aspen's battered body, her fading strength, her fierce determination despite her wounds. Nathan's rage simmered but didn't explode. Instead, it folded inward, cold and crushing. The weight of helplessness settled over him like an iron shroud. As the night dragged on, Nathan wrestled with the one truth he didn't want to face, that this time, Aspen might truly be gone. The image of her broken against the wall of the arena replayed again and again. And in that quiet cell, surrounded by the smell of damp stone and rusted chains, Nathan did what he hadn't done since this nightmare began. He blamed himself. But then something changed. Out of the darkness, a strange pinkish glow flickered before him, soft at first, then growing in strength. A portal, circular and shimmering, cracked open in the air like glass folding away from itself. From the swirling light stepped a girl, young, confident, dangerous in her calmness. She regarded Nathan for a moment, almost amused by his confusion. She asked if Nathan truly believed Aspen was dead. She pointed out that he hadn't actually seen her final moments, hadn't witnessed her last breath. Nathan's confusion deepened, suspicion rising in his chest. His first instinct was to demand to know who she was. The girl only smiled faintly, telling him that if it mattered, she could be considered his supporter, nothing more, nothing less. What Nathan cared about most, though, was Aspen. He asked what the girl meant by her cryptic suggestion. She tilted her head slightly, surprised that of all the questions Nathan could have asked, he chose to focus entirely on Aspen's fate. She told him plainly that Aspen was still alive. Nathan's heart hammered at that claim. But when he pressed her for details, she denied him. She said that where Aspen was didn't matter now, not for him, not yet. Nathan didn't like it. He didn't like her games, her riddles, or her secretive tone. But she told him there were more pressing matters to consider. With a flick of her hand, she expanded the portal, revealing a scene beyond it. There stood Ibuni, alive and pulsing with savage energy. The girl told Nathan that when he returned to the arena, he would face the beast again. She explained that last time Nathan hadn't seen the full scope of Ibuni's power, that the creature had been holding back, that the true battle had yet to come. Nathan surprised her when he said that he was glad. Revenge was all that mattered now. He said that fear didn't matter anymore, that fear wouldn't change a thing. He wanted to face Ibuni again, to finish what had begun. Curious about her true purpose, Nathan asked what she wanted from him. The girl smirked and said that she simply wished him luck in his future fights. Nathan, sharp as ever, didn't believe that for a second. He accused her of hiding something, of wanting something from him. She didn't deny it. She said they needed to sort out a mutually beneficial relationship, that she was here as his supporter, but with her own interests at heart. Then she dropped the real threat. She told Nathan that if she wanted him to win, she could help him win. But if he failed, if he lost this next fight, then she would personally make sure Aspen didn't survive. Nathan's blood ran cold, not from fear for himself, but for Aspen. Before she left, she told him that his fate, and Aspen's, now belonged to her. With that, she stepped back into the portal. The swirling light collapsed behind her, vanishing with a sharp hiss, leaving only two black feathers drifting to the ground like warnings carved from midnight. The next morning, the guards came for Nathan. His wrists were chained, his legs bound, and they led him from his cell with practiced cruelty. With every step down those dark corridors, anxiety twisted Nathan's insides like a tightening rope. But despite the dread, Nathan made himself calm. Even if death waited for him at the end of the hall, he would face it with the pride of a knight. They brought him before the owner of the arena, and without hesitation, they forced Nathan to his knees. The stone floor was cold against his bruised skin. Nathan spoke first, surprising even himself. He apologized, saying that he regretted the destruction he had brought to the arena's carefully orchestrated games. The owner sneered, saying that apologies changed nothing, not in a place where gold and blood mattered more than words. Nathan then said what he truly believed, that yesterday's spectacle hadn't been a fight, it had been an execution, a rigged farce staged for the crowd's amusement. But Nathan didn't fear execution. He said that being a knight was nothing more than an endless march toward death anyway. Every fight, every moment, was another encounter with the inevitable. Whether he died here or elsewhere didn't matter. What mattered was that he wouldn't kneel to the arena's twisted rules. Knights rarely lived long enough to see old age. Their lives burned away in endless wars, ambushes, and brutal campaigns. Death wasn't something that surprised them. It was expected, inevitable, a familiar shadow following every step. Nathan knew this as well as anyone, but even now, chained and battered, he refused to let that grim truth control him. He told the owner of the arena that he would give the spectators the show they craved, a spectacle worth remembering. And in return, he asked for one thing: that if he won, he be allowed to go home. The owner of the arena stood silent for a long, thoughtful moment, as if weighing the offer. Finally, he told Nathan that he would consider it carefully, his voice unreadable. Nathan didn't believe him. He knew the type: the rich, the powerful, the liars. This man wasn't going to let him go, not without some trick hidden behind that calm smile. But Nathan wasn't thinking about himself anymore. His thoughts were with Aspen. If she was still alive, and the mysterious girl's words gave him that thin thread of hope, then it wouldn't be enough for him to win. He would need to escape. Somehow, he had to find her, break them both out, and get them home. It would be a miracle. And miracles, Nathan knew, required planning and desperation in equal measure. He thought about the Dragon Legion, a memory surfacing from before this nightmare began. There had been talk of a plan, a recent development involving craft batteries, powerful enough to activate portals between realms. If Aspen was still among the living, perhaps some of those units might already be in play. 2 units might be deployed, if luck was with them. Maybe, just maybe, he could turn this twisted blood sport into their way out. Soon, Nathan was marched into a new arena. This one wasn't sand or stone. It was a dense forest, tangled roots and towering trees stretching far into the sky. The natural world stood here like a twisted theater, beautiful and lethal in equal measure. Looking around, Nathan thought that if he survived this next fight, freedom might actually be possible. But the elves weren't about to give him a fair chance. Before the battle could start, one of the guards stepped forward, pressing a strange revolver-shaped device against Nathan's neck. There was a soft hiss, a sting, and then a faint circular mark appeared on his skin, no larger than a mosquito bite. The drug worked fast. Nathan's legs gave out beneath him. His body hit the dirt like a puppet with cut strings. For several minutes, he lay helpless, his vision blurring and sharpening in uneven waves. With Nathan incapacitated, the guards removed his shackles and quickly retreated, eager to clear the area before the real violence began. Slowly, Nathan's strength started returning. He dragged himself to his feet, shaking off the nausea. Pain was everywhere, but his will was stronger. He staggered into the deeper parts of the forest, the distant sounds of predators already echoing through the trees. As he moved, Nathan wondered who else had survived the previous bloodbath. Were there others scattered through this nightmare? Would there be others like the man who begged for his life back in the arena? Or would it all be monsters from now on? He knew the truth already. This next battle wouldn't be easier. The enemies would be stronger. The games would be crueler. And if he wanted any chance of winning, he would need to unleash everything he had. He removed one of his gauntlets, revealing a glowing pentagram etched into the skin of his hand, ancient symbols woven into his flesh through blood-binding magic. Activating the sigil brought searing pain. Waves of burning fire surging through his bones, ripping screams from his throat. His muscles spasmed violently, his vision doubled, nausea twisting his insides. But after the pain faded, he felt the surge. Strength. Power. Resolve. Just as he steadied himself to move deeper into the trees, A new sound drew his attention, the thunder of wings and the low, guttural growl of dragons. Looking skyward, Nathan saw them. Several massive dragons, leathery wings stretched wide, descending slowly with a black, iron container chained beneath them. The container hit the ground with a heavy thud, shaking the roots beneath Nathan's feet. He crouched low, watching from a distance, blade ready. His first thought was that Ibuni might be inside, brought back for a cruel encore, or perhaps another twisted experiment meant for the audience's amusement. But then the doors opened, and what stepped out sent a new wave of revulsion through Nathan. A little boy stumbled forward from the container, no more than 10 years old, his face blank with fear. Behind him came a small girl, wide-eyed, trembling, her tiny hands clutching at nothing. Nathan's heart twisted in rage and disgust. These monsters, these elves, were using children now, throwing them into the arena to die for the entertainment of the bloodthirsty crowd. High above, in the viewing towers, the audience leaned forward in anticipation, their faces lit by glowing screens. Some cheered Nathan, calling him by the nickname he'd earned among the viewers, the handsome one. Some admired him. Others cursed him for lost bets, still bitter from his victories over the orcs. This time, the majority placed their wagers on Nathan. They wanted a win, but more than that, they wanted blood. In the central tower, the owner of the arena watched silently. He smirked at the eager crowds, thinking that anyone betting on Nathan was a fool. One of his guards stepped forward and whispered that the drug injected into Nathan was now active, coursing through his system, working its way into his blood. Another guard asked whether the owner really intended to let Nathan go if he won this match. The owner only laughed and said that Nathan wasn't going anywhere. No one ever left. But still, the owner knew Nathan could give them a show. That was all he wanted. A grand spectacle before the final execution. He watched Nathan closely, thinking that the polite knight from the morning had been hiding something. The defiance from the night before still lingered behind Nathan's steady gaze. The owner decided it was better to get rid of him sooner rather than later. With a wave of his hand, he gave the order, "Release the monsters." A second later, several monstrous forms stalked out of the darkness, shapes that didn't belong in nature, half reptile, half machine, grotesque amalgamations of fangs, blades, and living tissue. Nathan's opponents had arrived. Meanwhile, more children poured from the black container. Confused, terrified, their faces pale with the realization that they were being led to slaughter. Nathan's fists clenched as he heard the guttural growls of the monsters closing in. He didn't hesitate. He ran straight toward the children, shouting for them to get back into the container, to stay hidden. But he wasn't fast enough. Before he could reach them, one of the monsters emerged from the undergrowth, towering above the terrified children. Its jaw opened, revealing serrated rows of bone-white teeth, ready to rip them apart. Nathan pushed forward with everything he had left. He didn't care about the bets. He didn't care about the show. All that mattered now was making sure innocent children didn't die for someone else's entertainment. Only a heartbeat later, the children turned around and froze, staring wide-eyed at the monster towering behind them, ready to strike. Its claws gleamed, its breath a foul mist curling around yellowed fangs. More monsters began to emerge from the undergrowth, their guttural growls sending terror through the children's fragile resolve. It was clear, they were trapped, and survival seemed impossible. One of the creatures lunged from the bushes, claws raised to tear the closest child apart. But before it could reach its target, something cut through the air. A heavy sword spinning end over end. It struck the monster mid-leap, slicing through its raised arm and driving deep into its skull. The force of the blow slammed the creature into the ground, where it lay twitching, blood gushing, lifeless. The children stared at the fallen monster, and then at the figure who stepped from the shadows, a towering, humanoid lizard with sharp, reptilian eyes and a frame built for war. This lizard was the one who had hurled the sword with such deadly precision, and as he retrieved his blade from the corpse, he declared that he would kill every single one of the beasts who thought they could prey on defenseless children. The remaining monsters didn't hesitate. The promise of a fresh kill spurred them forward, a snarling tide of claws and teeth, aiming first for the lizard, then for the terrified children behind him. The lizard calmly reached behind his back, gripping the hilts of two short combat blades embedded in his own flesh, and with a sharp pull, he unsheathed them. Positioning himself between the stampede of monsters and the helpless children, The lizard tensed like a coiled spring before launching himself straight into the fray. His blades moved in a blur, flashing arcs of steel cutting through the dim light beneath the canopy. But the monsters weren't easily broken. One surged forward with a shriek of defiance, claws aiming for the lizard's throat. The lizard dodged low, fluid and fast, but not perfectly. One claw slashed across his face, tearing into his right eye. Blood poured down his cheek, blinding one side of his vision. Furious, the lizard retaliated. Both blades swept outward, reducing the attacking monster into heaps of torn flesh. Breathing heavily, the lizard scanned the rest of the enemy pack, who now began to hesitate, reassessing the threat before them. Two of the creatures tried creeping around his flanks, hoping to overwhelm him by sheer numbers. Nathan knew it was his chance. While the monsters were distracted by the lizard's ferocity, he rushed forward, scooping the terrified children into his arms, one after another, guiding them away from the imminent slaughter. His goal was clear: get them to the container and shut them inside. But as Nathan sprinted towards safety, another child emerged from the black container, calling out in warning. She tried to tell him that danger lay ahead, that he was heading straight into another trap. Ignoring his own mounting dread, Nathan pressed forward, determined to save as many as he could before the monsters closed in. Reaching the container, Nathan urged the children to get inside and lock the doors, but the girl who had warned him explained frantically that the locking mechanism had been damaged, shattered by impact during the container's landing. They couldn't seal themselves in, and already, the guttural snarls of monsters echoed through the woods behind them, drawing closer with every second. There was no choice. Nathan would have to fight. Just as the nearest monster lunged, Nathan pivoted on his heel, intercepting the attack with raw force. He grabbed the creature's wrist mid-strike, twisted it, and drove his fist hard into its abdomen. Blood sprayed from its gaping maw. Without hesitation, Nathan followed with a brutal punch to the creature's skull, the crack of impact echoing across the clearing. The monster's limp body collapsed at his feet. But Nathan wasn't done. He seized the creature's head with both hands and drove his knee upward, sending its broken form flying through the air, slamming into a group of other monsters trying to advance. The force sent the others scattering in panic, tripping over each other in their haste to flee. They abandoned their fallen companion, terrified of the ferocity Nathan had just unleashed. Returning to the container, Nathan told the children that for now, they were safe. But one of the girls spoke up, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. She said that among them, one boy had lost his leg, while another had fallen into violent panic, screaming and lashing out at anyone who tried to help him. Nathan's sharp eyes studied her, noting for the first time the pointed tips of her ears. She was an elf. For a second, he wondered whether her people, her younger clansmen, might try to use her in some political play later, another pawn in this brutal game. But now wasn't the time for that. The lizard warrior with the mangled eye limped toward the container, blood still pouring from his ruined socket. He regarded Nathan with curiosity, saying he hadn't expected to see representatives of earthly species here, trapped like him in this living nightmare. Nathan studied the injury, asking if the lizard would survive. The lizard responded without hesitation that he would heal within a day. His tone was calm, confident, like someone used to brushing off wounds that would kill most others. Drawing closer, the lizard offered his hand and introduced himself as Akiba Hashio. Nathan gripped the clawed hand firmly and thanked him for saving the children. From behind them, the elf girl introduced herself as Nally, but neither Nathan nor Akiba gave her much attention. Their focus remained on the battlefield. Akiba said that he was glad those wretched monsters had finally backed off. Nathan, however, wasn't as hopeful. He believed something worse was coming, and he suspected it would be the Chimera. Nathan explained that the Chimera wasn't just some beast. It was a monstrous lizard with blades growing from its legs, a predator designed for carnage. Akiba frowned, saying he thought the Chimera was marked by tiger stripes, not blades, but before the argument could continue, Akiba moved with lightning speed. He shoved the children away with a powerful kick, sending them sprawling back toward the container. Nathan instinctively turned toward the kids, his voice sharp with confusion, asking why Akiba would do that, but then he froze. Where Akiba had stood, there was now a shower of blood, gallons of it splashing across the grass. Something had struck, something fast, something deadly. And Akiba had taken the blow. Nathan stands motionless as crimson blood rains down across his visor. He watches as Akiba is torn apart midair, screaming in agony, limbs severed and blood splattering violently. He silently observes the chaos unfold, standing still in the aftermath of the carnage. Blood paints the forest floor around him. He reflects inwardly that once again, someone falls while trying to shield him. Memories begin to stir violently within his mind. Aspen commands him, asking what he is waiting for and demanding he stand up quickly. He reflects that those are obvious words. He questions inwardly why he has to live like this. A distorted, shadowy version of the elves bellows angrily, calling out for the death of sapiens. He screams inwardly, yelling at the long-ear bastards to shut up. He is consumed by anguish, asking himself where it all went wrong. He believes that the whole world denies him. He wishes he could start over. Suddenly, a female voice cries out in desperation. Nally shouts, "Sapiens, wake up!" She pleads, "Please, get a hold of yourself." He stands before her silently, looking down at her with clenched fists. She looks up at him with wide golden eyes filled with urgency and pain. From a distance, the forest path stretches wide. Scattered bodies lay motionless across the field. Nally and Nathan stand together in the blood-stained grass near a large, metallic container partially embedded in the ground. Nathan stands silently beside the girl. As she dashes off to Akiba's body, her footsteps are marked by urgency. She kneels beside a red-skinned reptilian man lying on the grass. The man groans and says that he's sorry, he was already here. He struggles and mentions his leg. He says that he feels like the bastard who attacked him is still gnawing at it in his mind. He yells at him not to say that. Nathan looks on silently and reflects that thanks to the unique resilience of the lizardian he won't die, but he can't fight anymore. Akiba then curses himself for not noticing sooner. He silently calls upon Kotal, and asks them to please protect them. The Kotal dragon is a rarity among other dragons, only emerging from the emerald jungles every now and then, and that it is also a deity. He tells the wounded reptilian not to talk and to save his energy. The lizardian lies still, injured. Akiba explains that the creature roams freely through swamps using camouflage. He states that this is a characteristic of that chimera bastard. He continues, stating that according to his calculations, it went toward a 45-degree angle, the same direction the ghoul that ran away earlier took. Suddenly, the injured lizardian cries out in pain. He yells that it's cold. The warrior turns toward him in alarm and asks what's wrong. The lizardian shrieks that his legs are freezing. The girl, now glowing with soft blue magic, holds her hand over the lizardian's legs. She looks up and asks if he can't see. She's performing hemostasis and cooling preservation. The warrior is surprised and questions whether elves can really do something like this too. He says that if it's done right. She interrupts, shouting that the bastard is coming again. The warrior and the elf girl snap their heads toward the noise. Nathan picks them up and in a blur dashes through the trees, kicking up earth and branches with violent force. Leaps through the air just in time to evade the massive impact of the chimera. Lying on the ground, Nathan pants heavily and asks if everyone is okay. The elf girl answers that she is okay. She sits up slowly. The red-skinned lizardian struggles to rise and groans that his body doesn't have much left now. From above, the three figures lie on the grass beside the blood-stained clearing, beneath the shadow of the massive impact zone created by the charging monster. Branches and leaves rustled violently overhead as something massive surged through the forest canopy. The trees trembled, scattering leaves in every direction. The armored warrior sat up, breathing heavily. He thinks to himself that he thought he was going to die, and concludes aloud that there's no time to relax. As he stands up, he states that they need to prepare quickly. He reaches for a blade embedded in the ground and pulls it free. He then says that he'll borrow it for a bit. The red-scaled lizardian, unable to move, replies that he can do as he pleases, as he can't use it anyway. Nally steps forward, fire in her eyes. She exclaims that if he is planning to fight that guy, then she will help too. She adds that if it's her, she can reduce the monster's mobility. She states that when the monster attacks, she will freeze the ground. She tightens her fist with magical energy sparking from her palm and says that if they all jump on that fallen monster, they might succeed. Nathan, however, quickly responds that it won't do. The elf clenches her fists and yells, asking why he opposes just for the sake of opposing, and declares that it won't get him anything. Her eyes narrow with frustration, and she accuses him of ignoring her because she looks young. She demands to be taken seriously, saying that she has probably lived 10 times longer than he has. He calmly states that that's not what he meant. She looks confused, surprised by his words. He then says that he needs her skills. Turning away slightly, he adds that they need to modify the plan a bit. Meanwhile, deep in the jungle, the Chimera, a hulking beast, charges forward with deafening stomps. Its grotesque form surges through the trees, closer with each bound. Akiba, wearing tribal headgear and a ceremonial belt, he sat in what looks like a spiritual trance inside a containment area, glowing energy coiling around his form. Then, alert, he tracks the monster's distance. He says aloud that it is 70 meters ahead, then corrects himself, stating it's 65 meters, and acknowledges that it's getting closer. Nally, glowing with magical energy, prepares herself beside Nathan. He asks her if she heard that and instructs her, referring to her as Freeze, to get ready. She yells back in protest that she is not Freeze, but insists that she is ready nonetheless. Nathan, focused and intense, mentally urges himself to remember the enemy's mobility. She glares forward with a determined look, ready to cast her spell. He instructs her to freeze the ground on his signal only. She frowns, skeptical of the tactic, and internally thinks to herself, questioning what kind of plan that is. However, the warrior doesn't waver. He affirms internally that he will use the opponent's mobility against it, by using the frozen ground to knock it out.